All right, so let me wrap up my, game take because I didn't have a chance to do it yesterday with the things that I didn't like. And look, this is all about the defense. You'd be hard pressed to find a game or two this year in the NFL that was as bad defensively as Washington's game was Sunday against Detroit. Take out, a couple of red zone stops. Detroit was 4 for 6 in the red zone. The defense was in complete and utter shambles from the start. The Lions had a lot to do with it. They're really good offensively, and the last two opponents have been very difficult to match up with for a defense that is a shell in terms of the personnel of what they wanted out on the field. But also, it's got to be more than that when it's as easy as it was on Sunday. 7-on-7, basically, for the entire game. Like just, passing 7-on-7, environment, pitch and catch, nobody near anybody. That was really quite remarkable is how many times there was a receiver who caught the ball and said, "Where is everybody? Where's the defender? He's back over here," or they mixed up and they're all over here. It was bad. And this is the stat that I've been promising you that I think, I don't know, man. I'm sure that there's something else out there. I haven't seen it. By the way, several of you linked to me, and I appreciate this. I can't believe I forgot about it. Washington's stretch in the Giant and Cincinnati games last year, where they didn't punt and they didn't turn the ball over. They had a couple of kneel downs in those games, and those do count as drives statistically. But, in the Cincinnati game, they basically had 8 scoring drives and 2 kneel downs. Pretty damn impressive in that 38-33 win over the Bengals. And in the Giant game, remember, it was all field goals, 7 field goals in that game, but they had a kneel down or 2 in that game as well. So, yeah, the Lions were 8 for 8 on their drives to start the game, and then they ran the clock out on their 9th. But here's the thing that, to me seems almost impossible to pull off. On the Lions' first 7 drives of the game, based on their starting field position, there were 536 possible yards available. I had it wrong Sunday night on my podcast. I think it was like 12 yards off. I went back and, did the math and took my time with it this time and got the actual. So what I mean by that is if they took over from their own 30, they had 70 yards available to them on that specific drive. So if you take the first 7 drives of the game, based on where they started field position-wise, there were 536 yards available to the Lions. They got 522 of those 536 yards. 97% plus of the yards available to them, they got. I don't know what that means in terms of like a record, the percentage of yards available, drive success, etc. I'm sure somebody's done it. But it's one way to describe something that's almost impossible to describe because the defense was so unimaginably awful on Sunday. But that's one way to describe it. 536 available yards, and they got 522 of them on their first 7 drives. They did have an 8th and a 9th drive, which is why there were more yards. The 8th drive, they got a field goal. The 9th drive, they just ran out the clock. The final numbers, 44 points, 546 total yards, 8 yards per play. As I said before, good God, 8 yards per play, 5 for 10 on 3rd down, 2 for 2 on 4th down. When you see teams that score 44, typically when teams are like above 38 points in a game, it is because there was a short field or two, because of a turnover on downs, etc. You didn't have a lot of that on Sunday. You didn't have any of that from the offense. Anyway, Washington didn't sniff a takeaway with the exception of a Luvu tip pass that hung in the air. The Kinlaw had a brief shot at it, but he wasn't going to get it. This was, by the way, another game without a takeaway. They're now tied for the second fewest in the league. The teams behind the one team behind them, the Jets, they're far behind. They played one fewer game, though, to be fair. Green Bay had a takeaway last night. They now have the exact number Washington has, which is 6. So, like I said in the open, it's really hard to get a takeaway of the football when you're not near the football. And on Sunday, literally at times, they weren't near the football. That was every week it's, pretty much consistent. They can't cover, they can't rush the passer, they can't stop the run, they can't tackle well. But what was alarming to me, and I'd have to watch the all 22, which I'm not interested in doing this week. We'll get the Suter film breakdown tomorrow. But 10 to 15 yards was like the average distance, I thought, between receiver and defender. There was a 2nd and 8 in the fourth quarter where Goff threw out into the flat to Amon-Ra. And I thought that there were at least 15, if not 18 yards between him and the closest defender. This was the play where I thought he looked surprised when he caught it, as if the play had been whistled dead for some reason. Like he looked around and said, where is everybody? Like that's a pitch and catch close to the line of scrimmage. That's where typically the defenders are the closest to the receiver. No, there was a 4th and 1 to Raymond where I just couldn't believe how open he was. Like they must have thought that it was 1st and 10 or not 4th and 1, something other than 4th and 1. We had another, Three Stooges, mix up with 2 defenders running into each other. Not that Detroit even needed that on Sunday. And like in the moment after the game or during the game, I was just like, I don't understand this. It's not normal. Like we all know bad defensive football, but this was like abnormal looking. Like it can't be right. Like you got to do something about it. Watching Jahmyr Gibbs, by the way, against our team run for 9.5 yards per carry, 9.5. It just reminded me of that playoff game. I mean, good God, what was Ben Johnson thinking back on January 18th? Seriously, that was a big mistake. Gibbs averaged 10 yards per carry in the first half of that playoff game. And by taking it out of his hands, they ended up putting it more into Goff's hands or Jameson Williams, remember, on the double pass, and they just turned it over too much. And that's why they lost the game. That and the fact they couldn't stop, Jaden and the offense. But Gibbs getting more than the 14 carries he got in the playoff game, if he had gotten, say, 8 more carries in the game, the score and the game would have been different. I'm not saying Detroit would have won the game. It would have been different, though, no doubt. I mean, how about just how bad the run defense was? It was like Gibbs didn't even see anybody until he got to the second level and didn't feel anybody contact-wise until he was at the third level. Now, the overall defensive day was horrific, and it was definitely also undisciplined. Quan Martin getting penalized. His quote after was, "I was pulled to the ground and," quote, "kicked in the nuts," closed quote. Okay. Javon Kinlaw said that he lost his cool and got flagged 15 yards because he saw Amon-Ra hit Daron Payne first, and that's when Payne retaliated. And Kinlaw called it, quote, "some BS," closed quote. So, yeah, number one on the list of things that were just, I mean, this was easy. This was truly one of the most horrific defensive performances you will ever see in an NFL game. It's hard to be any worse. And again, I understand the context. They have a shell of the team that they expected to have out there. We've obviously identified, people who are reasonable and know football understand injuries are a reality, and they are the number one reason this team is having a terrible season right now. They have been catastrophically hit by the injury bug, but it doesn't explain everything on defense. They were non-resistant. There was zero resistance. There was zero. We saw the effort in the first half against Kansas City. This was disorganized, discombobulated, and disinterested. It just was. And that's why immediately following the game, I said, Dan Quinn needs to understand that not doing something, whether it's right or wrong, like they might behind closed doors be saying, look, people don't understand what Joe's working with. This is not all on him. It's everything. But at that point, after one of the worst defensive performances that you can actually witness an NFL team put out there, it wasn't just that they were getting moved on by an excellent team. It was that no one was near people when they caught the ball. I mean, for crying out loud, Jamison Williams did a backflip on a slant where he scored. He knew he could do or not a backflip. He knew he could do a flip into the end zone because there was nobody near him. It wasn't like he was going to land near somebody. I mean, that's embarrassing. In terms of specific players, there was one player for me, one that stood out as this dude legitimately is trying to ball out. Jacob Martin, the guy Steve Suter has said for 4 or 5 weeks running right now is one of their best defensive players. Nobody tries harder than him. He had maybe the only pressure that forced Goff into like an incompletion. Yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn understood that it had reached a point, especially after that performance, where not doing something was going to fall back on him in a way that made him look weak, feckless. So he did something about it. You can say it's too late, but he did something about it after truly like an embarrassing situation defensively, not just recently, but really over now 30 games. That's the bottom line, is this can't just be about the last 2 games. It's got to be about the 30. Okay? Joe Witt Jr. seems like a hell of a guy. Dan Quinn was loyal to him, gave him an opportunity. It didn't work out. Whether it's all on him, partially on him, or very little on him. Some of it's on him, and eventually the resume speaks for itself. And there are a lot of reasons for it. Again, there's context, understood. But this defense has not been good since he took it over. The other things on my list of things that I didn't like, the third down offense wasn't great, 2 for 10. They were 3 for 3 on fourth down. They also had a 3rd and 15 in which Mariota checked it down over the middle of the field for better field goal range on their first field goal. I thought that was a smart play. He missed some things for sure, accuracy-wise on third down. But again, I had Mariota on the good list. I thought he played at a B+, A- level. Also, the last thing on the list of things I didn't like when they punted. When they were down 35-16, was it 35-16? And it was a 4th and 3. I don't care where the football is. Like, just go for it. Why punt?